blue and red lights strobed off the vinyl siding of Pinecone Crossing while a woman in a sash that read Acting President shrieked into a bullhorn about mailbox symmetry. 2 EMTs were treating my wife in the front seat of our car. Across the cul-de-sac, Lorna Pritchard, the HOA Karen of record, thrashed on a gurney with her wrists gently restrained, still spitting out citations like confetti. Section 8. No unregistered decorative pumpkins, she hissed as a deputy clicked the strap. Someone's porch camera captured the moment she yelled, "I'm the law here," right before the paramedic calmly replied, "Not tonight, ma'am. Let me back up and explain how we got here. I'm Mateo Granger, quiet owner of the corner ranch with the cedar planters and the very boring life. I keep receipts, listen to rain sounds, and wave with 2 fingers instead of 3. My wife, Ava, is 8 months along and moves like royalty in yoga pants. The suburb is Pinecone Crossing, an aggressively beige cul-de-sac in Maple Hollow where the newsletters have footnotes and the rules have rules. Enter Lorna Pritchard, a woman who believes God outsourced jurisprudence to her clipboard, who once issued a warning for excessively joyful wind chimes. It started with Lorna's crusade against our baby on board yard sign. Political messaging, she sniffed, tapping the laminate with her pen. I pointed out that it was literally just announcing a baby, not a political candidate. She responded by pulling out a 3-ring binder with color-coded tabs and reading from a section she'd apparently written herself about implied messaging. Then came citations for a stroller parked in public view, a doormat deemed too script-forward because our welcome mat used cursive font, and an email blast accusing us of flaunting gestation to garner leniency from HOA rules. She began filming Ava on afternoon walks for documentation purposes, always staying exactly 1 foot outside what could be considered stalking distance. She placed an orange sticker on our mailbox reading pending fitness review. When I peeled it off, she replaced it within an hour. Neighbors whispered. Some approached us quietly to apologize, saying they'd also been terrorized by Lorna but were too afraid of retaliation to speak up. One couple confided that Lorna had threatened them with daily fines when their daughter visited with their infant grandchild. Lorna posted blurry photos of our driveway to the HOA portal with captions like, "Is that an unauthorized belly?" Another post showed Ava carrying groceries with the caption, "Excessive lifting, potential liability." We laughed at first, thinking surely someone would tell her to stop. But Lorna had cultivated a small group of equally miserable supporters who encouraged her behavior. Then she started cutting across our lawn at odd hours to peer through the nursery window, claiming she was verifying neutral paint compliance. I caught her at 10 p.m. one night with a flashlight and a paint swatch booklet. The harassment escalated week by week. Lorna would time her golf cart patrols to coincide with Ava's morning walks. She'd drive slowly beside her, clipboard in hand, muttering about community aesthetics being disrupted by visible pregnancy. The golf cart had a custom license plate that read Bylaw 1. She'd added a PA system to it and would occasionally broadcast reminders about regulation compliance as she puttered through the neighborhood. She sent us a certified letter titled Fetus-Based Fines, demanding we pay a monthly surcharge of $200 for what she called lifestyle choices that impact property values and strain community resources. The letter included a breakdown of alleged costs, including increased liability insurance needs and potential damage to the pristine family-friendly but not too family-friendly image of Pinecone Crossing. When we ignored it, she sent a second letter threatening to place a lien on our property. That's when she installed a motion sensor on the community sidewalk outside our house. We later learned she'd labeled it Womb Watcher in the HOA equipment inventory. The sensor was connected to her phone and would send her alerts whenever Ava stepped outside. Neighbors later told us they'd see Lorna sprinting to her golf cart whenever the notification pinged, racing to document whatever violation she'd convinced herself was occurring. Our neighbors started texting us screenshots of her increasingly unhinged posts in the HOA chat group. One read, "Pregnancy is a choice, not a decoration. If we wanted a daycare aesthetic, we would have zoned for it." Another said, "If we allow belly exposure, what's next? Public nursing? Diaper genies visible from the street? The slippery slope to chaos." A third post included a poorly photoshopped image of our house with a massive baby bottle edited onto the roof, captioned, "This is our future if we don't act now." My wife tried to laugh it off, making jokes about Lorna's dedication to insanity. But I could see the stress affecting her. She started checking the windows before going outside. She'd tense up whenever a golf cart engine started nearby. Her blood pressure ticked up at her checkup, and her doctor asked if there were any sources of stress at home. When I explained the situation, the doctor's jaw literally dropped. She wrote a note recommending we document everything for potential legal action. On a Saturday at noon, during a simple run to the car for a doctor's appointment, everything changed. We were running a few minutes late. Ava was moving carefully down the driveway when she paused to breathe through a Braxton Hicks contraction and rested a hand on her belly. I was 10 feet ahead, keys in hand, about to unlock the car door. That's when Lorna swooped in from her golf cart like a hawk that got its law degree online. The cart squealed to a stop. She leaped out with surprising speed for someone who'd spent the last decade in a seated position of petty authority. False labor is an HOA disruption, she declared, stepping directly into Ava's personal space, close enough that my wife had to take a step back. You're creating a scene. This is a quiet family neighborhood. I turned around just as Lorna was pointing her pen at Ava's stomach like she was identifying a crime scene. I started walking back, saying, "Lorna, back up. Give her space." But Lorna was on a roll, lecturing about how pregnancy emergencies should be handled discreetly, inside one's home, away from public view. My wife tried to sidestep her, but Lorna mirrored her movement, blocking her path. That's when I saw it happen. Lorna's sneaker snapped forward, insane and deliberate, striking my wife's belly with enough force that the sound carried across the quiet street. Time slowed to a crawl. Ava's face went from confusion to shock to pain. She doubled over and gasped, her hands flying to protect her stomach. I lunged forward and caught her before she could fall, my heart hammering so hard I thought it would crack my ribs. The neighbor's doorbell camera pinged, capturing everything in high definition. Lorna lifted her clipboard like a shield and shrieked. She leaned into me. "This is assault on an HOA official." I was defending myself from aggressive posturing. Her voice cracked on the last word. I immediately pulled out my phone and called 911, keeping my other arm around Ava. I switched the phone to record mode the moment the operator answered. Within minutes, half the block was outside. Mr. Chu, still holding a gardening trowel. The Hendersons with their twin toddlers. Miss Patricia from 3 doors down, already filming on her tablet. Lorna looked around at the growing crowd and seemed to realize she'd made a catastrophic error. She tried to flee on the golf cart, but in her panic, she turned too sharply and wedged it directly into Mr. Chu's prized azalea hedge. The cart's wheels spun uselessly, kicking up mulch and shredded flowers. She revved the motor impotently as sirens approached in the distance, growing louder. She was still revving when the first police car turned onto our street. The response was swift and overwhelming. 2 deputies arrived, along with an EMT crew and a city crisis clinician who'd apparently encountered Lorna before. We handed over 3 different angles of video footage, 6 printed emails where she'd threatened gestational sanctions, and that certified letter she'd slid under our door labeled fetus-based fines. The EMTs transported Ava for monitoring while I stayed behind to give my statement. The clinician gave Lorna a quick evaluation and sent up a flare with the phrase "danger to others." Under the city's mental health statute, they placed Lorna on a 72-hour hold for psychiatric evaluation. Hospital first, jail later if criminal charges stuck. As she was loaded into the ambulance, she was still shouting bylaws like scripture quotes, mixing in Latin she'd obviously learned from a coffee mug. That night, an emergency HOA meeting was called by the vice president, who'd apparently been waiting years for an excuse to take control. It was held in the clubhouse under a portrait of a seagull inexplicably wearing a tie, a decoration Lorna herself had commissioned during her first term. The room was packed. Every seat filled, people standing along the walls. The energy was electric. I rolled in with a projector I'd borrowed from work and a smile that said Discovery Packet. I'd spent the afternoon organizing every piece of evidence into a presentation that would make a prosecutor weep with joy. The board members sat at their table looking like they wished they could teleport to another dimension. The videos played on the big screen in chronological order. First, doorbell camera footage from 3 weeks ago showing Lorna peering into our nursery window at night. Gasps rippled through the room. Then, the golf cart harassment compilations, set to timestamps showing she'd followed Ava on 17 separate occasions. Someone in the back whispered, "Oh my God." Next came the screenshots of her unhinged HOA portal posts, blown up large enough that everyone could read her deranged commentary about pregnancy being a community disruption. The treasurer put her head in her hands. Then I played the main event. The approach, clear as day. Lorna parking her cart and rushing toward my wife. The kick itself, captured from 3 different angles, including a crystal-clear view from the Henderson security system. The backpedal as Lorna realized what she'd done. The failed golf cart escape attempt. Mr. Chu's azaleas getting absolutely demolished. By the time the footage ended with Lorna still revving her cart while sirens blared, the room was silent except for someone's shocked breathing. Mr. Chu stood up and whispered, "My azaleas will heal, but can she?" His voice broke on the last word. Several people nodded. Miss Patricia called out, "I saw the whole thing. I've never seen anything so deliberately cruel in my life." A detective who'd arrived to observe the meeting stood up at the back of the room. He was holding a folder thick enough to use as a weapon. He read out the charges recommended by the district attorney in a flat, professional tone that somehow made them sound even more serious. Aggravated battery of a pregnant person, a second-degree felony. Multiple counts of harassment. Criminal trespass for the unauthorized midnight visits. Stalking charges being considered based on the pattern of behavior. Possible additional charges for filing false police reports, as Lorna had apparently called 911 3 times that day claiming we were threatening her. The hospital had already cleared Ava and the baby. Strong heartbeat, 0 complications, excellent fetal movement. Thank God. When I announced this, the room exploded in applause. People were actually standing up, clapping for my wife's uterus like it had won state finals in competitive gestation. I saw tears on several faces. Mr. Chu was wiping his eyes with his gardening gloves. Then the detective dropped the final bomb. He mentioned that Lorna had also installed that motion sensor on the community sidewalk titled Womb Watcher without any authorization from the board or the city. Apparently, it was also collecting data on every person who walked by, a potential privacy violation affecting the entire neighborhood. The board members collectively tried to sink through their folding chairs. The board president, who'd been silent this whole time, looked like he was calculating how fast he could update his resume and move to another state. The psychiatric evaluation turned into formal criminal charges. The 72-hour hold gave investigators time to dig deeper into Lorna's behavior. They found years of complaints filed against her by other residents, all dismissed because previous boards had been too intimidated to act. The charges turned into booking. Lorna's mugshot made it onto the local news website, still wearing her acting president's sash. The booking turned into no-contact orders so thick you could use them as shingles. The judge had added a 500-foot restriction, meaning Lorna couldn't even drive through our neighborhood anymore. The board voted Lorna out in a landslide. 32 votes in favor of removal, 0 against, and 2 abstentions from her only remaining supporters who looked thoroughly defeated. Then, after their lawyer finished sweating through his shirt and possibly his soul, they implemented what they called the Granger Amendments. 0 HOA jurisdiction over bodies, pregnancies, or medical paraphernalia. Mandatory de-escalation training for all board members, to be renewed annually. Security cameras cannot be used to inventory neighbors or track their movements. Any violation would result in immediate removal from the board and a minimum $5,000 fine. 3 months later, we sat in a courtroom that smelled like old wood and anxiety. Lorna's sentencing hearing had finally arrived. She'd shown up in a beige pantsuit, clutching a binder of laminated HOA regulations like a security blanket. Her lawyer, a tired-looking public defender, had already tried to explain multiple times that HOA bylaws were not admissible as a legal defense for assault. The judge, a woman in her 60s who looked like she'd seen everything twice, read through the case file with an expression of increasing disbelief. She looked up at Lorna over her reading glasses. "Miss Pritchard," she began, "I've been on the bench for 23 years. I've seen a lot of things. But assaulting a pregnant woman because of HOA regulations is a first." She paused. "Let me be very clear. Your clipboard does not grant you immunity from the law." Lorna's sentence was a cocktail of consequences designed to ensure she'd never terrorize another neighborhood. 18 months of probation with monthly check-ins. 400 hours of community service specifically not involving any position of authority, to be completed at a women's shelter where she'd witness actual community support. A 1-year ban from any HOA leadership position within county lines, with the option for municipalities to extend it. A $5,000 fine payable to the county, plus $7,000 in restitution to cover our medical bills, legal fees, and the emotional distress counseling Ava had needed. The judge also ordered Lorna to complete anger management classes and write a handwritten apology letter to Ava with no clip art, no HOA letterhead, and no references to bylaws allowed. The letter would be reviewed by the court before being delivered. When the judge read the sentence, Lorna's face went through a color spectrum. White to red to purple to a shade I can only describe as aubergine rage. Her hands clenched around her binder. She actually stood up, interrupting the judge mid-sentence, and tried to argue that the judge was violating HOA bylaws by imposing restrictions on her leadership abilities. The courtroom went dead silent. The judge's expression could have frozen lava. "Miss Pritchard, sit down before I add contempt of court to your problems." Lorna sat, but kept talking under her breath about jurisdiction and proper procedure. "You assaulted a pregnant woman," the judge said coldly, enunciating each word like she was explaining physics to a toddler. "Your clipboard doesn't grant you immunity from consequences. This is not an HOA meeting. This is a court of law, and you are not in charge here." That's when Lorna burst into tears right there in the courtroom, still clutching her binder of laminated HOA regulations like it was a life raft from a sinking ship. She sobbed that nobody understood the pressure of maintaining community standards, that she was just trying to protect property values, that this was all so unfair. Her lawyer gently tried to guide her out of the courtroom, but she pulled away and turned back one last time. "You're all going to regret this when Pinecone Crossing falls into chaos," she shouted, mascara running down her face. "Who's going to enforce the mailbox symmetry? Who's going to stop people from parking recreational vehicles in their driveways?" The bailiff stepped forward and Lorna finally left the courtroom, her sobs echoing down the hallway as the door swung shut behind her.